There's been a lot of buzz in terms of the science of reading and how much it emphasizes phonics. It's just one of 5 critical components within the science of reading and teaching reading effectively and efficiently. We've discussed phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. Now we're moving into phonics. Phonics is the connection between the phoneme, the sound, and the grapheme, the written letter or written letters that represent those sounds. When we're teaching phonics, we're teaching students that individual letters and groups of letters represent sounds. Those letters that represent sounds are then put together to form words. Students should be taught the phoneme-grapheme connection as part of a comprehensive literacy program. This is where you're teaching students how individual letters or groups of letters represent specific sounds. As a part of your instruction in BEGLAD, you can link to that literacy instruction that may be happening in another part of the day. There are several models to teach phonics in particular. The idea is that you can embed phonics practice and reinforcement throughout your day, not just when you're teaching it as part of your literacy program. Let's look at some specific strategies where you can embed phonics skills in and reinforce those skills for students who need additional repetition and practice. Let's start with one that may be well known to you or relatively familiar to you, and that's the Cognitive Content Dictionary. As part of the Cognitive Content Dictionary, we introduce a signal word or a vocabulary word that students are going to focus on throughout the day. When we go to initially write the word, we have the opportunity to practice both phonological awareness and phonics. For example, imagine that students were studying about space, and the word that you wanted to focus on was space. You might say to the students, listen carefully, here's a new word we're going to focus on today. Listen first. Space. What's the word? And students should say space. If they're able to hear those sounds being blended together, they're building phonemic awareness. For example, if you're using the word hero on your Cognitive Content Dictionary, you might build some phonological awareness for students. You might say, listen to the syllables, he-ro. What's my word? Hero. You could also break it down to the phoneme level. Listen carefully. Hero. What's the word? Hero. In either case, you're building phonological or phonemic awareness as students are hearing the sounds. That only takes a few seconds. Once they have identified the word, they are hearing the sounds, you can move to writing the word on the CCD. This is where we're moving from phonological awareness into phonics. So I would then say to the students, our word is hero. What's the first sound that you hear in hero? Now, sometimes students get a little confused here and they say H. And I will say at that point, H is a letter. What's the sound that we hear? Yes. What letter represents the sound H? Correct. Here, either I can write the H or I can have a student come up and write that letter as part of interactive writing. This is moving into phonics, making the connection between the sound and the written letter. If you wanted to, you could even say, what's the first syllable we hear in hero? He. Someone come up and write he, or I'm now going to write he. The first letter in he is H. The second letter in he is E. What's the first syllable, everyone? He. Let's listen to the word hero. The second syllable is ro. The first sound in ro is r. That's from an R. Then O, the letter O. Read the whole word, hero. That shouldn't take you more than a minute, maybe a minute and a half, not long. Now, it may take a little longer if it's a longer word, and that's okay. The point is, you're reinforcing phonological awareness or phonemic awareness and phonics skills as students make the connection between the sounds and the written letters. These phonics skills can be reinforced on any chart that you're using where you're writing down words, where you're adding words. Bringing students' attention to the phoneme-grapheme connection from the sound to the written letter or the sound spelling pattern is building in phonics reinforcement in practice. For example, if we're looking at the word space, we might have to point out explicitly that space is spelled with the A consonant E pattern for the long A. We might also have to point out that the S sound in space is spelled in two different ways. At the beginning it's spelled with an S, at the end it's spelled with a C. Now, we should be connecting the skills that students are already learning in literacy. This isn't necessarily the place where I'm introducing new sound spelling patterns, where I'm doing a lot of direct instruction around that, but rather as a tool for reinforcement, as a tool for practice, as a tool for repetition for students. That's only going to advantage students. It's going to support the students who haven't quite grasped it yet, and reinforce for those students who may already have it but could use that extra practice and repetition, and in just a few seconds or a very short and fast time frame. This same sequence of integrating phonemic awareness and phonics can also be utilized in a picture dictionary if you're using that in lieu of the CCD. In the same way, we're drawing students' attention to the sounds in a particular word as well as the sound spelling pattern, the phoneme to grapheme connection. Now, this can be practiced in any strategy. For example, if we go over to a poem or song or chant that we have posted on the wall and we're singing it together, I might utilize a processing opportunity to point out and find specific spelling patterns that we are learning. For example, we might be learning that the long E sound is spelled in a number of different ways. If this week or over the past couple of weeks we've been focusing on the EE spelling pattern that says E, then I'm going to look for words that contain that pattern. For example, you find the word tree and you underline or highlight the EE spelling pattern. You may have another word that says needle as it relates to particular types of trees, and highlight or underline the EE pattern in that word. It's drawing students' attention to the sound spelling patterns that they've been learning in literacy and how those are applied in the text and in the content that you're learning about throughout the day. The Big Book is another place to point out sound spelling patterns. You can look at the words within the Big Book and point out where are the patterns that we have been focusing on present. As students are helping you read or chorally reading the Big Book, you might point out, oh look, here is that sound spelling pattern that we've been working on this week. Again, that provides reinforcement for the students. It helps them to see the skill in context and throughout the content that you're studying throughout the day. Whenever we do an input chart, we review the input chart with the students utilizing word cards. The word cards are another opportunity to focus on specific spelling patterns. Because we're handing individual students specific words, we can be strategic about which student gets which word. We might provide some of the vocabulary words with an underlined sound spelling pattern. For example, if they were reviewing an input chart about plants and they see the word tree, the word is color-coded to the text on the input chart. However, we can underline the long E pattern, EE in this case, to point that out, to draw that out to students. As we're handing out those cards, we can make reference to it and say, oh, here's that pattern we've been looking at, EE. What sound does that make, everyone? E. So this word is tree, or the word might be needle, or whatever the word is that contains that particular spelling pattern. The idea is reinforcing that phonetic element as it comes up within instruction. Specific sound spelling patterns can also be found within the expert groups. When you're reading that text, while we're focusing on comprehension and the meaning of the text, we might build in some of the phonetic elements, the practice decoding specific words, recognition of words through our instruction in the expert groups. We can also use the cooperative strip paragraph to focus on and find specific spelling patterns. This can be a great part of the editing process. As we look for words that students have written, they may not have used the correct spelling pattern within that word. Anytime we have written words, we can reinforce those phonetic elements and those concepts that students have learned during literacy time.